Eventually, the founder will have to step out of being the primary producer for sales. And the reason why a lot of founders get stuck here is because they can't repeat the process to be able to teach it to somebody else. I use a specific framework. I know you interviewed Curtis. Curtis uses a specific framework, but it's how can I make these calls repeatable and mechanical in nature so that way I can get super consistent outcomes that are highly, highly predictable. So if you're taking 10 calls and you're closing 1 to 2, how can I get you closing 3 to 4? How can I get you closing 5 to 6 out of those same 10? That way you don't have to spend more money on revenue and you can 2x to 3x your business purely on sales efficiency.
Welcome back to Growth Lab Sessions. I'm Joao, CEO of Stealth White Label Agency, and my mission is simple: to help marketing agencies grow and build sustainable businesses. Today, we're bringing in Cory Jackson, the founder and CEO of Rev Haven and the force behind Sales Silverback, the framework that's changing how agencies build high-performance acquisition engines through people and process. Cory is known for helping sales teams unlock, scale, structure offers, and close qualified deals faster. His work is battle tested, his style is pretty direct, and his results speak for themselves. Rev Haven has supported top names like D-Dung, Joshua Johnston, and Anatoly Lubinsky, among many others. Cory, welcome to Growth Lab Sessions. Are you ready to take it to the lab?
Hell yeah, let's do it, man. Thank you for having me.
All right, awesome. Super stoked to have you here. Let's start things out by you giving a little bit of context and sharing a bit of your story.
Yeah. So I have been in sales for 15 years now. It's kind of weird to say that out loud. 15 years. And I've been in sales leadership positions for about 8 of those years. From sales managers to fractional sales directors and all the way up to working basically as somebody's fractional CRO. But I've been doing it for a long time. Very untraditional route. Actually went to school for engineering, believe it or not, and then fell out of love with engineering relatively quickly, and met with a bunch of mentors. They all told me to go into sales. So I did. I made that transition. And I have sold everything from startups to finance to corporate to high ticket to coaching, biz op, agency, everything like that. And I'm really excited to chat with you because agency by far is my favorite sale. So
mentors told you to go into sales, right? And why is that? Why did they do that?
Yeah. From the engineering side, I really enjoyed solving problems. That's why I wanted to become an engineer to begin with. But I really didn't like the sociability of engineers. I didn't like the super rigid hierarchy of engineering structures. And although my job was to solve problems, I didn't really feel like I was having an impact. And I've been financially driven most of my life. So being able to have a direct proportionate outcome of your skill set to income was something that I was attracted to. So, but really it was about solving problems and being able to talk and help people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I did go into sales myself off of university. I studied economics and was pretty sales driven. So the advice was to go into sales, work for startups, and then switch into, and then eventually become an entrepreneur. So I get, that kind of advice to go into sales. I did receive the same advice. When did you start working with agencies?
About 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. What was that process like?
Yeah, I came from the high ticket space. Mm-hmm. Worked in kind of like a pressure cooker environment in the high ticket space. Was doing about $350,000 to $400,000 of cash collected pretty consistently, and then that business, went through some trials, and then I ended up going over to the agency space. I met Ashton, and then Ashton and I started working together. It must have been about 4 or 5 years ago. And I started closing for Haven Media before they made the transition into bad marketing. But I've been in the agency space for about 4 or 5 years.
So you initially got into it as a closer for Haven Media?
Yeah, closer, and then their sales director, sales manager for Haven. And then during the merge, went into kind of like a closer sales lead style position. And then through that process, I was able to realize that I can do this for other businesses. So I ended up leaving bad and then starting the business that we're in now, being able to help agencies scale.
Nice. And so Rev Haven started when you left Haven, correct?
Yeah, so it was initially called Sales Haven,
Okay.
and all we did was fractional sales management. And because we were good at what we did, we kept running into problems. Like we were creating our own problems where either an entrepreneur couldn't keep up with marketing, and we would like churn a really good sales rep because the entrepreneur couldn't figure out how to turn the lead flow up. Or leads and sales would work really well, and then the operational aspect and fulfillment would like start to fall apart. So we would have to take 7 days off, 2 weeks off of selling for the entrepreneur to catch up on the fulfillment side. And honestly, I just kind of got tired of waiting for the entrepreneur to fix the problem. So what we started to do is we actually have our own marketing agency now, where we can solve that problem on our own. So we're the agency for agencies, so we can help agencies do lead generation for themselves. And then we have our own operational department done for you, where they can actually fix all of the fulfillment and all of the processes and everything like that.
Okay. So you actually do the fulfillment for your agency clients?
Just the operations of it.
Okay.
Yeah, so we actually don't do like the media buying and things like that, but we help set up the processes, things like ClickUp, their SOPs, the client journey, all of those kinds of things to make sure that as they scale, the infrastructure can support that scale.
And so the transition between Sales Haven to Rev Haven was essentially to give a more holistic solution for agency owners to actually scale, right?
Yep.
Removing your bottleneck from them having more success, or removing their own bottleneck of success by implementing the done-for-you solutions like lead generation and operations as well, right?
Yep.
And so by tying in lead generation, sales, right, which is your forte initially, and now you're just a forte on everything, and operation, that like trifecta is how you're able to scale agencies. Is that correct? A quick break in the podcast to tell you about Stealth, my white label marketing agency. If you're an agency owner and feeling stuck in fulfillment, hiring, and team management while trying to scale, this is for you. Stealth helps agency owners like you take fulfillment off your plate so you can focus on growth of your agency, from running ad campaigns and SEO to creating high converting content and managing CRMs. We handle the back end for your clients so you don't have to. Whether you're drowning in client work or struggling to scale your agency, Stealth gives you the support you need to scale without the headache. And if that sounds like a fit, then check out our website link in the description and book a time to speak with a consultant. And now back to the pod.
Yeah, because most agency owners, and I talk about this a lot, and it's one of my favorite concepts to talk about. Most agency owners are really good at the thing, right? So if they are a Facebook media buying agency, they're really good at buying Facebook traffic, right? If they're an email agency, they're really good at copywriting and writing emails. If they're a creative agency, they love being behind the camera, right? And that allows them to be the artist in what they're good at, right? But a lot of agency owners aren't good at the rest of the business, right? So what we do from a done for you perspective is we handle leads and sales and operations so that the agency owner can stay the artist, like they can stay in their zone of genius, and then we can handle really what I'll call the rest of the business, right? The only thing that we don't do is like finances and things like that, to be determined. That may happen in the future, but we want to be able to handle the growth of the business and just allow the agency owner to stay in their zone where they are better than everybody else.
Awesome. And so who is your ideal agency profile to work with?
Yeah, we'll work with any different type of agency. And what I mean by that is it doesn't matter if it's Amazon or paid media or creative or email or whatever. Like any type of agency is all fine because the model is very, very similar. From a revenue threshold, though, we do need agencies to be collecting about $30,000 to $40,000 of new cash every month. That's where we really come in and we can help them explode. Underneath that mark, it's typically just like an effort problem, where they're still in kind of like the beginning stages of being an agency. But right around that 30 to 40K is where they're running into some strategic bottlenecks, which is where we can come in and help solve them.
And just to clarify for people listening, 30 to 40K in new cash collected. So that means that every month they're collecting additional MRR or additional monthly recurring revenue of 30 to 40K. And so, to agencies that have like a 3K retainer, that means they're able to sell at least 10 new clients every single month. So that's where you can come in, apply lead gen, sales, and ops to really scale the agencies, right? So go ahead.
If they have let's say an average lifetime value for a client is 3 to 4 months or something like that. Like that's the average amount of time that a client stays with that agency. They'll be north of $100,000 a month of total cash collected. Because if they do 30 this month, 30 next month, that brings them to 60, 30 the month after that, brings them to 90, 30 a month 4, brings them up to about 120 or so. And that's where the bottlenecks occur, that we can really solve in a done for you capacity is right around 100,000 of total revenue per month, which is about 1.2 million or so a year, is where we become really, really effective. Underneath that mark, they're typically not running into anything that's super strategic yet.
Yeah. So underneath that mark, right? What's typically, have you worked with agencies that are underneath that mark, or most of your work is around the 30 to 40K plus in cash collected every month?
Yeah, we've definitely worked with some agencies that are underneath that mark. It doesn't happen very often, but through the evolution of the business, just like anybody, when you start a business, you start working with everybody that you can, right? And then over time, you kind of refine your ideal client profile. But yeah, I've definitely worked with some people that are underneath that. And the biggest bottleneck underneath that is typically like divided attention, where the entrepreneur isn't focusing on things that are actually revenue generating. And they're trying to build systems for things that like don't exist yet and all of that kind of stuff. Solving problems that they've never even run into or aren't going to run into for a while. So typically what their time just needs to be spent on initially is just generate as much money as humanly possible and hire like a VA to handle as much of your administrative tasks so that all of your time can be spent on revenue generation. And then once you're there, then that's where the operational and sales and lead generation complexity comes into play. but most of the time they're just trying to be busy for the sake of being busy.
Yeah. So Cory, like, let's say that you're talking to yourself in the past, right? You're a beginner agency owner, super, you have strong ambitions to scale, to start collecting like 30 to 40K a month, right? To a lot of agency owners starting out, it's kind of a dream scenario, right? I know it was for me. If you were to give an advice or, to your younger self, like how would you break down the playbook of scaling to that 30 to 40 K in new cash collected?
Yeah. I would spend every minute that I had and every free dollar that I had on generating revenue. That would be it, right?
Okay.
Because a lot of these guys, man, they try to build these operational systems and these workflows and these backends for client management and all of this kind of stuff. And they spend hours and days on being able to build this. And then they build it and they think it's really pretty. And then when they actually put clients through it, it doesn't work because the
Yeah.
client experience is actually very different than what they initially mapped it out to be, which I've always found to be really interesting. So until you have enough data to be able to determine this is how the client journey should go, this is how fulfillment should go, this is how the reporting should go, this is what my clients are asking for all the time, then your job should just be to get as many people through the door to be able to get that feedback loop as short as possible.
Yeah.
So your time should be spent on revenue generating activities, which is really going to be sales and marketing, right? And then obviously fulfilling on your clients and things like that. You want to offload that fulfillment as early as possible, at least to some degree. That way you can spend your time only generating money. And that can be all kinds of stuff. That can be actually taking sales calls. That can be doing prospecting, whether that's through the form of emails or texts or cold calls or those kinds of things. That's going to be creating content. That's going to be actually running some ads for yourself, whatever that might be. Now make sure that you pay yourself out of the business.
Yeah.
You don't want to be enterprise rich but cash poor when at the beginning of a business. So make sure you pay yourself out of that, include that in your operational expenses, but also don't be a jerk about it either, right? Like if you're making 20K a month as an agency owner, don't pay yourself 19,000, right? Like start to build a little bit of a war chest.
Yeah.
That way you can, start to have some really interesting testing and you've got some runway and things like that. But your job all day should either be on a call or fighting to be on a call. And as long as you can do that between the golden hours of, let's call it 9 to 5, 9 to 6, and your job is literally trying to get in front of as many people as possible, your agency is going to grow as a byproduct. You don't know what your LTVs are. You don't know any of that stuff. So you just need to get as many people through the door as possible until your fulfillment actually does start to fall apart.
Yeah.
Then at that point, you can focus on the operational excellence, go through what we call a stabilization period, where you stabilize at 40K, 50K a month. You fix the operational stuff, and then you go full bore into being able to generate revenue again.
Yeah. And so in terms of like, doing everything that's humanly possible to get in front of people, right? Like, do you recommend starting out with a niched agency, general agency? What's typically your advice for agency owners starting out?
I would definitely start niched, but that doesn't mean that you have to be hyper niched. So I think like local lead gen, as an example, is niched enough. You don't have to like only service tire shops in a specific zip code, right? Like that's way too niched. But the reason why niching is so important is because you need to get your marketing language down for lead generation. And if you are talking to a specific avatar with a specific problem, over and over and over again, your marketing language is going to get refined over time, which means it's eventually going to convert better and better and better. One of my favorite quotes is, if you try to solve everybody's problem, you'll actually solve nobody's problem. So you need to be able to pick a specific person that is dealing with a specific problem. That way you can speak to the problem really well, and it'll help you across all marketing channels. Because if you just try to market generally out of the gates, especially with like no case studies or no name recognition or anything like that, it is going to be very, very difficult, and your message is going to land on deaf ears.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that like you at least are speaking into a problem that somebody is experiencing over and over again that you can solve. So I would definitely niche down at initially, and then broaden as you start to get traction in a certain area.
Yeah. And in terms of structuring offers, right? That's something that I've seen a lot of content from you about, or like in the websites, things like that. After you have a niche, right, or a sub niche, you can, and you mentioned marketing language as well, right? You can create marketing language for a specific niche that touches on their desires, their pain points, right? That language that's going to attract them to want to work with you, because you can solve their problems, you can get to their desired results. Now, an offer, when we talk about an offer, like, how do you view structuring an offer for an agency? Like, is that, like, just walk us through a framework that you like to use.
Yeah, so the first thing that I actually do is I reverse engineer on price modeling. In order to do that, man, you actually have to understand what your operational expenses and what your fulfillment expenses are, to be able to price yourself accordingly. So you need to start there and understand like what your pricing model actually needs to be in order for you to be profitable, at least right now. Because agencies specifically run through something called a variable cost model. So as they grow, they incur more costs, right? So that could be staff members, that could be software, that could be more marketing expenses, or all these kinds of things. So as they grow, their operational expenses, or OPEX, goes up, right? So we need to understand maybe what the forecast is of that, and obviously we help with those things as well. But you need to understand what you need to run to be profitable right now. Okay. And then what I like to do is I like to start initially with what I'll call like your no-brainer offer. And what I mean by that is, what is the offer that you could fulfill on for a client with very, very minimal effort, because it is so deep into your zone of genius that it doesn't require that much thought, effort, and energy, right? So if you're the king of running Facebook ads, you could charge 3K, 5K a month for just running somebody's Facebook ads, right? It doesn't require that much thought, effort, and energy to just do, let's call it media buying, right? And then from there, every tier up that you go is increments of strategy. Now, a lot of people, especially like full stack agencies, they think it's another service, right? So they start with Facebook, and then they go to Google, and then they add email and those kinds of things. Now, that's true, like they're adding a different platform, but each tier that you go up is a level of strategy to get platforms to play together and create something that we call like a self-feeding flywheel, right? So every tier that you go up is more and more strategy that they're paying access for. Because as an agency owner, our highest leverage asset that we sell is our mind, right? It's not actually pushing the buttons on the keyboard, right? It's what are the orders that we push the buttons in, and those kinds of things. How do we strategize? What does the creative look like? How do I get the things that are going out on Google to play really well on Facebook, to mimic the same language on my emails so that I can create solidarity through the process, all of that kind of stuff. So they're paying for strategy increments. And then you're going to run into something called a value cliff. Have you ever heard of the value cliff before? So the value cliff is where you can't charge more because people can't tie the value of your service to the price. So like for a Toyota Camry, right? I couldn't charge you 100 grand to buy a Toyota Camry because it's just not worth it, right? For your eyes, for my eyes. So there's like a value cliff that exists where I might be able to charge you 30, 40 if I was a really, really good salesperson. And then 50 is like, no way. Like, you're not going to buy the Camry for 50, right? So there's a value cliff that exists on the service side. Now, the sad part is a lot of agencies undercharge by so much that they never even run into this value cliff. Like, they have no idea where it exists. I see agencies all the time charging $2K a month for their service, and then another agency in the same space providing the same level of output is charging $7K, and they're making 3.5 times your revenue on the same service, which is why they're actually able to scale, because they have cash to be able to deploy. So sometimes, like, agency owners, purely to grow, the only lever that they need to pull is charging more. No, that's not always the case, but it does happen frequently enough to mention it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I think now we're talking to a bit more experienced agency owners, right? So up until this point, we've kind of spoken to the early agency owners that are looking to scale up, focus all your energy in sales, revenue generating activities, niche down, create an offer that's a no-brainer offer. Now, speaking to, the agency owner that's already collecting the 30 to 40K a month, maybe they're doing sales themselves, right? They figured out some sort of lead gen that they can generate maybe like 1 to 3 appointments a day, right? They're good at sales. They have some sort of fulfillment, VAs, in-house, white label agency. From that point, what are your, what are the first things that you like to assess when, taking on a new client? And what are the, the top 3 things that's usually the 80-20 for you?
Yeah. So I will say that every business owner is different. And what I mean by that is, if you view a business owner as like a hat rack, right, where they have all of these different responsibilities, every business owner, yeah, exactly. Every business owner wants to offload those hats in a different order, depending on the things that they really enjoy and the things that they don't. A lot of agency owners do not want to sell anymore, and they just want to get back to client fulfillment or being able to create content for the business or whatever it might be. So if that's the case, then we look at offloading sales first. But there are some agency owners that love selling. So they want to stay in that seat for as long as possible. So then we look at, the lead generation or the ops side, depending on where the bottleneck is around their growth. So it just depends a little bit on what hat the business owner wants to offload last. Okay.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's super, I relate to that a lot because, we're a white label agency. We've worked with over 600 agencies at this point. And, the agency owner profiles are always different, right? You have like the one that really cares about fulfillment, the one that's just all sales, whatever, figure fulfillment out. I want to sell and collect cash.
Yeah.
Those are, the 2 scenarios are really fun to work with, but I think it does make sense. Like a agency owner is creating their agency in order to, do whatever they like doing, right? And so they're doing that piece of the work. They keep doing that piece of the work while you help them with, the pieces that they don't really care too much for. Now, speaking to, agency owners that are collecting like that 2K retainer a month, right? They're providing like, maybe they have 3 packages, which is something that I see very often is like, a niched agency focus on private education, right? Like they're helping schools, whatever. They have 3 packages that they're offering: Facebook ads and SEO, Facebook ads, SEO, and content, right? And then it's like 2K, 3K, 4K. Is that fair? Do you think that's pretty traditional?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Very traditional.
Yeah, and then so when you look at that and you see that they have some sort of lead gen model, they're generating like a decent amount of leads. Their conversions like it's like a 10 to 20% from lead to say to close. What are the first things that you like to change in order for them to collect more cash? Is it the price where you explore the value cliff that you were talking about? Or is it just the volume where you're like, hey, you're spending 5K and generating like one lead a day for yourself. Why don't we spend 20K and generate like, four leads a day for the month, and you can like immediately 4X that result? How do you assess those things?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first thing that we look at is being able to make sure that it's repeatable. And we look at the repeatability and scalability in the three areas that we can help manage. So the first one is like lead gen is great. If you tried to scale spend, does it all fall apart? Right. So we want to make sure that the lead generation engine is consistent. The second one is sales. Are your sales consistent? And not even just the outcomes, but is the sales process consistent? Things like as rudimentary as being able to confirm your appointments and having appropriate automations, and when they opt in, what is the information that they get? Are you sending them PDFs, YouTube videos? Are you sending them testimonials? Like all of that kind of stuff. But then also getting onto a call. Can you go through the same framework through the call every single time? And the reason why that is so important, especially for founders that are good at sales, and I'm going to say that in quotation marks because I've heard a lot of founders say they're good at sales and they're actually not that good at sales, but that are good at sales, is there's two major things that founders run into. So the first one is what we call founder bias. So founder bias is if they are on all the ads, they're on all the content, they're on all of those things, and then they show up onto a call, they are going to close at a higher clip because the people feel like they know them because they've seen their face a bunch of different times, right? So they may have some inflated numbers, right? Imagine 10 years ago, Steve Jobs could probably outsell iPhones versus anybody in an Apple store, right? Because he's just Steve Jobs. Everybody knows who he is. They want to talk to him. They want to buy an iPhone from him, all that kind of stuff. But then the second thing is eventually the founder will have to step out of being the primary producer for sales. And the reason why a lot of founders get stuck here is because they can't repeat the process to be able to teach it to somebody else. So they need to have a very, very specific framework that they go through. I use a specific framework. I know you interviewed Curtis. Curtis uses a specific framework. But it's how can I make these calls repeatable and mechanical in nature so that way I can get super consistent outcomes that are highly, highly predictable. And then from there, it's how efficient can I get? So if you're taking, 10 calls and you're closing 1 to 2, how can I get you closing 3 to 4? How can I get you closing 5 to 6 out of those same 10? That way you don't have to spend more money on revenue and you can 2x to 3x your business purely on sales efficiency. And then the back end, normally a lot of agency owners who are newer do not have any operational excellence at all. So they sign their deal, they get like an automated email that goes out that says, hey, I need these dependencies. And then they get access to their Facebook account or Google account or whatever. And then they just kind of do their own thing in those accounts, and they don't report on anything. They don't manage anything. They don't client journey anything, nothing. And then if that client churns, they can't go back to see what was good and what was bad. And then if they wanted to hire a media buyer or a strategist, they have nothing to train them on, right? They have no systems in place. They have no training in place. They have no onboarding in place, no client journey in place, no SOPs in place, like nothing. So basically what they do is they close and then they go get access to this person's Facebook account and run it. And that's like the whole system, right? And then it becomes really, really inconsistent, and client churn is going to go up and down depending on the hire that you make versus the systems that you have.
Wow.
So yeah, we see that happen all the time.
Yeah. Man, for you guys listening, this is go back 2 minutes right now and listen to that again, because I've worked with many sales as well, and Cory just mapped out most of the pain points that agency owners have. I feel like, Cory, when you were just talking in these last minutes, I kind of felt I related a lot to you walking me through my own journey, scaling my agency to over 6 figures a month, right? You just define like every stage of the way where, you have like the main problems of agencies. And that makes me wonder, in terms of your service that you provide to agencies, I've spoken to your team in the past, just like general conversation in events that we both attended. But, when you start working with agencies, do you have specific sort of guides for what should be happening in sales, what should be happening in customer journey, what should be happening in general metrics around different department? Like, tell us a little bit more about that, so maybe we can shed some light, as a first step for agency owners that want to start fixing a couple things. And maybe, at the end of the call, we might be able to send them some sort of guide or something like that, framework that they can get some value from.
Yeah. So we have frameworks for every single division of the business.
Done.
And what I will say too is the frameworks are about 80% accurate. And what I mean by that is there's like nuance between agency to agency. So like if you're an email agency versus like a organic creative agency, there's going to be some things that are different. But the frameworks are going to be about 80% accurate because the models themselves are pretty consistent. So on the lead generation side, you have to, not even like, Cory, would this be cool to have? Yeah, it'd be cool. No, you have to. You have to have 3 different lead generation sources. You have to, right? So the first one is you do need to have some element of cold outreach. I know that is scary for a lot of people, but you do have to have some element of cold. Now that can be cold calling, that can be DM strategies, that can be sending people lead magnets or Loom videos, that can be cold email. And any of that stuff is fine, but you have to have some element of cold. Okay. The second one, organic. People need to know who you are to be able to build trust with you, and you are going to close at a significantly higher clip if they feel like you have been in their living room for hours because they're consuming your content on their couch. Okay, so you have to have an element of organic traffic, and that can be shorts, that can be reels, that can be stories, that can be YouTube channels, that can be podcasts, that can be all kinds of stuff where you have an element of organic traffic coming in. And then the last one is depending on the scale that you're at, but at some point you will need an element of paid. Now, the problem when people get paid to work is they forget about the other 2 and they stop doing them. And when that happens, they create a massive codependency on another platform for their business to run. Hypothetically, Mark Zuckerberg wakes up in a bad mood one day and just turns off your ad account. Does your entire business go with it? Right? That's a problem. So you need to make sure that you have 3 legs to the stool. That way, if one of the legs breaks, the entire business doesn't go down. Okay. So on the lead gen side, you have to have that. Now, what's interesting is it will be weighted very differently. So if you are a paid media agency working with e-com brands, you're probably going to be more paid ads heavy, right? But if you work with PR firms, you're probably going to be more cold outreach heavy. Like your emails are probably convert at a significantly higher clip, depending on who your avatar is. But regardless, you need all three. The weights of them will just be different depending on the avatar that you're serving. From a sales side, you need to have all of your automations in place. Now, I am a huge proponent in the fact that automations do not replace the human element. They do not. So if you only rely on automations for all of your interactions with your clients, your agency will suffer. But having automations, one, is a great stopgap just in case you forget something. It's a great scalability tool, but also it helps you represent as a capital B business. So if somebody opts in, they immediately get a text message and an email. Like that feels like, wow, okay, this agency has some stuff figured out immediately from the opt-in, let alone from the sales call and everything like that. So have your automations in place. It's important. Then we need to make sure that your sales process is pretty dialed in, from what does the client journey look like from opt-in to scheduled call, what is their forced content consumption before they hop on, how does the sales call actually ran, how are we collecting payment, what does the agreement look like when the agreement goes out, after that's done, what does onboarding look like, right? All of that is a part of the sales process. And then once that is done and accomplished, then we focus in on what actually happens on the call. So are we frameworking the call well? So going through rapport, setting the frame, through your discovery. I use current desired cost of current consequence. That's kind of how I framework my discovery. How are we actually presenting the offer? Are we doing a 1-call close or a 2-call close? Are you having to go back and present a custom deck or those kinds of things? Are you using presentation tools or are you just talking about it, right? We need to go through all of those kinds of pieces. And then obviously objection handling, making sure that that is systematic so that you can have predictable outcomes. Once that is done, then what does the onboarding process actually look like? How does the client get their first win? So one of the things that you want to measure on the operational side is what we call TTFV, which stands for time to first value. So when they pay you money, how long is the cycle before they feel like they get a win, right? And you want to shorten that cycle as much as humanly possible. And then be able to create the client journey, expectations, reporting structure, as well as communication infrastructure so that you guys can talk. What do the meeting cadences look like? Everything like that. Onboarding calendars for new talent. Capacity measurements. A lot of agencies suck at this, being able to determine what the capacity of their team is. And then they overload them before they hire, and then they make a hire out of a need versus a want, and then they churn somebody and all this kind of stuff, right? So we have frameworks for all of those pieces, but that's how your business runs efficiently without you needing to be in it.
Yeah. Wow. That was just short of a masterclass. I feel like if you just spoke for the full hour instead of me asking you questions, that would be like a complete framework for scaling up an agency from sales to, potentially offboarding them. But that's really cool. You talked a lot about sales process, and then the transition from sales to account management. I feel like that's worth a lot of gold already, and gives the audience a glimpse into what it would be like working with you. I'm sure that's just the tip of the iceberg, essentially, right? We can't get into everything in just 20 minutes, an hour talking here. But I appreciate that. I feel like it'd be super valuable for the audience to kind of understand the frameworks that you talked about, and get some sort of framework themselves so they can start kind of tinkering with changing up their agency and stuff like that. What I'm willing to do for my audience, I don't know if you have something, but I'm willing to just, create a workbook from the things that you mentioned in this podcast. I'm really good at creating workbooks. It's a recent skill that I've mastered. And they can kind of, just fill in the blanks, things like that. I will put Rev Haven's funnel, right, website. So if you are that ICP, you are collecting 30 to 40 in new cash collected. I've seen like what I mentioned in the beginning, Didang and Anatoly. I've personally seen them in person. I know they have super successful agencies, and I know that they have worked with you. You do have their testimonials on your website, so that's super cool. Like your work is for sure battle tested, and you have worked with amazing people in the industry, like Ashton Shanks, for example. I know that he knows his shit. If you're in the agency space, you should know him. So that's pretty awesome. I'm super glad and thankful for you sharing that sauce with the audience. Everything that he's spoken about is, super legit, right? Like being able to articulate the things the way that Cory does in such a simple manner. It's sort of like a really amazing tennis player watching them play. It seems easy, right? But when you actually try to play, you're like, stumbling all over the court, and it's not as easy as it seems and as he makes it sound. So thank you so much for that, Cory. I do have some rapid fire questions before we close this up.
Let's do it.
What's the most impactful software or tool that you use to run your agency?
It's a tie between Go High Level and ClickUp.
Okay. Wow. Cool. How many niches is your agency actively involved in?
7.
7. Okay, cool. Can you share one unique tactic that you've used to acquire new clients?
Yeah. I have sent people DMs that say, "Hey, I found something broken, a broken link on your website." And then people respond back immediately like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Where is it?" And then that's how I initiate the conversation from there. That works really, really well. The other one that I've done is if I'm going after like a big whale, I'll find something on like their Facebook page that I can tell that they're really passionate about, and then they'll send them like a little gift in the mail, like $20 from Amazon. Like if they really like cars or something, they have a BMW, I'll send them like a BMW hat and be able to send it out to them. And that typically grants me at least enough goodwill to have a conversation.
Yeah, though I love that. I've never heard the broken link one, and I've haven't spoken to people that actually take the time to find something that somebody cares about and send them a gift. So that's some awesome sauce for agency owners trying to land some new sales right there.
Yeah, and do that with big clients.
Yeah.
Yeah, big clients like the leaders in your industry or niche, like that's how you're going to get on the phone with them. It's not going to be through paid traffic.
If you could automate one part of your business, what would it be?
It would probably be some of the sales admin, which I'm actively working on developing our own AI tool that does that. But like the notes and tasks and keeping the pipeline management organized and everything like that. What I'll call like CRM hygiene.
Yeah.
But we are working on that right now. But that would be one of the big ones for me. Yeah.
Nice. Which marketing trend do you think is overrated?
Boosting posts. I think boosting posts doesn't give you the same flexibility as just running paid traffic with that post, nor the same level of insight. So if you have a post that works really well, just put it into like a true advertising campaign versus just like boosting a post to get more reach.
For sure. It's so easy to just press on that boost, get more engagement, but then you don't have that many analytics.
Yeah, engagement and views don't turn into dollars. So like that's why you have to be able to put them somewhere in there.
For sure. And so if you had to focus on only one channel, I'm thinking about the three-legged stools now, but if you had to focus on only one marketing channel for growth, what would it be?
Man, that's so agency dependent.
Yeah.
For my own business, I've we've actually only run ads for our events. So I've been able to grow all through word of mouth, referrals, and networking events. And we do about 400, a little over 400,000 a month, without running any ads. So I would say like lean into your word of mouth and referrals. If you're underneath, thirty to $40,000 of new cash every month, lean into that super hard. Ask all the time, frequently and often. But if you're above that, I hate saying this, but paid is probably going to be like, if I had to pick one, it's still a codependency, but it's going to be the highest leverage if you only have one thing to use.
Yeah, for sure. And guys, really take that insight into action, because you do not want to depend on one platform for generating all your leads. I've been there. I've relied on pay for a long time. Now we do have a lot more revenue or lead generation channels. We actually have about 8 lead generation channels. And so it's super important to have that mix so you can, be in different places, right? Get authority from organic too. That's super important. And everything kind of powers each other as well. It's not only about, not depending on only one thing. It's also about one thing empowering the other, right? The better you get at organic, that means you're speaking to the camera better. That means that your ads are going to be better, right? And so things kind of empower each other. Let's say the cold outreach. If you're doing cold outreach, people like click into your profile and don't see that much organic things. It's not going to help you as much as having a lot of organic content out there, right?
Yeah.
And so think about it from that perspective as well. And,
Can I,
go ahead.
I just want to add one thing to that. A really good visual for me was, imagine you had this gigantic boulder in your front yard, right? And if you're only reliant on one source of traffic, that means that you have one 2x4 that you're shoving underneath the boulder to try to move it, right? And you can pull really hard on that 2x4, but the problem is if that 2x4 breaks, that boulder stays in your yard. Whereas if I can shove 4, 5, 6 different 2x4s underneath this boulder and push, I don't have to push nearly as hard, first and foremost, to move the boulder. But if one of my 2x4s break, I have 4 or 5 other ones that I can still get this boulder out of my yard. And growing your business is moving that boulder, which is why you need as many of those as you can.
Cory, I love the visuals that you share. That helps like see things so much easier. And I love that you have a definition for everything. That means that you're a really good teacher. And, I'm glad that we're spending this time because I'm learning a lot from you as well. My last 3 questions for you is, what's your current revenue? You just mentioned it's around, over 400K a month. So that's super powerful. That's a lot of revenue to generate. That means, you're having amazing success, and I commend you on that success. In terms of managing that cash flow, like, how do you look at investing in new opportunities versus just, you don't want to be the agency owner that's generating 20K and putting 19K in your pocket, right? But like, what do you see as the balance to manage that cash flow?
Yeah, so first thing that we did is we created a war chest of 9 months of operating expenses. Some people say 6 months, some people say a year. I just split the difference. We did 9 months. So what are operational expenses? We have 9 months of that in the bank, which if you're an agency owner, you have to do that first. Like, that is priority number 1. And then as your operational expenses grow, you have to make sure that you add to that account. So you don't want to put aside 9 months when your operational expenses are 10K, and then when you have 20K operational expenses, not adjust the war chest, right? So you need to be able to do that. That way you can take some more risks and those kinds of things. From there, we do pay everybody out. I pay myself out. I actually W-2 myself out of the business, which if you're not doing at a certain point, would highly recommend from a tax advantageous perspective. And then we run everything as a pass through. So Rev Haven's LLC is a pass through, and it eventually goes into something called a holding company. But what we're doing now is we are looking at acquiring other businesses and agencies. That's what we're deploying our cash for at the moment, to be able to grow and scale. It's not just sitting there accruing no interest. Also, if you have a holding company, make sure that everything is in a high yield savings account in your hold company. At the very least, you get a little bit of kickback in return on that. So that would be my suggestion. And then from there, you can play in the markets, or I'll do all of that kind of stuff. But none of that becomes relevant or important until you have a certain runway of operational expenses, anywhere between 6 months to a year. Then you can start to get creative with the cash.
Ooh, I love it. I'm going to take some insights myself and create this holding company on top. Now, last question for you is, or second to last, what's your biggest bottleneck today?
Talent. Talent. Yep. So we run at such a high efficiency clip, and we have exorbitantly high levels of competency on our team, and finding more people that we are even remotely close to that level of competency, or that we feel really confident that we can train into that level of competency, that total addressable market just isn't very big. So talent is a big one. So being able to find more sales directors so that we can have a bunch of clients on the fractional side, being able to find more very, very skilled operators, and then being able to find people who are what I'll call true lead strategists on the marketing side, because AI, I think, is going to replace a lot of media buying and copywriting, and sometimes even creative, depending on what you do. But there still needs to be somebody behind the wheel that's a strategist for that. So being able to find those people. So talent right now is our biggest bottleneck.
Yeah. And when you say talent, and as that being your biggest bottleneck, is there like a reason why it's so hard to find like really excellent people for these different roles?
There's just not that many, like finding
Not
an
that
ad.
many with experience.
Exactly. Yeah. So like if you look at total addressable market, just like you would as a marketer, right? For admins, there's 2 billion people that could do an admin task, right? But if I want to find a sales director who's managed an 8-figure business before or bigger, there's like, I don't know, 200, right? There's just not that many of them,
Yeah.
especially with relevant experience in the space. So there's sales directors out there who, work for like Goldman Sachs, right, in the finance realm. I can't put them onto, an agency account, right, just because they have no background or experience. So
Yeah.
just the TAM on that is relatively small. But we are continually looking. And pro tip for you as an agency owner, always be hiring, or always have your talent pipeline open, because even if you don't have a spot for them now, as soon as you do, you want to have people to call on. So just keep that talent pipeline open.
For sure. And so, Cory, thank you so much for answering all of those questions. It's been an amazing conversation for myself, and I believe for many of the listeners watching or listening. But before we close, what's one piece of advice that you like to give to agency owners looking to scale their businesses?
It's not going to be what you think. My one piece of advice is try harder. As silly as that sounds, but I want to put you through this thought exercise that I actually did with Curtis the other day. Imagine how different the world would be if everybody gave 100%.
Massive.
Massively different. Massively different. And if everybody gave 100%, we wouldn't have 80 to 90% of the problems that we deal with every single day. But if you're trying to scale, like scaling, I don't want to say isn't hard, because like it takes a lot of strategy and effort and those kinds of things. But it is simple in the fact that you need to acquire more customers than you churn every month. So like the math, relatively easy to do. And all you have to do is solve the constraints of what is keeping you from doing that, which does require effort and strategy. If you don't have the strategy, go find somebody that does. But if you know how to do that, just do it.
Let's go. And where can listeners connect with you?
Yeah, two big platforms for me. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you just type in Cory Jackson, Rev Haven, you'll see me. I'll be at the top there. And then the other one is Instagram. You can look up Sales Silverback. I'm sure, as you can probably tell behind me, that is my go-to. So feel free to find me there, and just shoot me a DM. Be happy to chat.
Awesome. Yeah, you should definitely connect with Cory. If if you're under that mark, or if you're over that mark of cash collected every month, definitely connect with him. I would strongly advise you guys, if you found value listening to this podcast the first time around, listen to it again. There's a lot of massive insights that, maybe at first you might listen to it and be like, ooh, that's obvious. But Cory has been in this industry for over 10 years, right? Working with agencies for over 4 years. And so he's seen it all, and he's helped many agencies scale through his service that he provides to agencies focusing on lead gen, sales, and operations. So thank you for joining us, Cory. And for you guys tuning in, make sure to subscribe to Growth Lab Sessions so you never miss an episode. If you found this conversation valuable, leave us a comment, a like, follow us, subscribe to us, and I'll see you on the next one.